Hey everyone, welcome back. So we are going to go through the second part of this video. We're going to cover a bit more advanced topics of React. So we're going to go through its memo, use callback, and React's context providers. So I hope you enjoy, and I will see you around. Okay, so back to where we left off in the last tutorial. So we reached this point where we were rendering a list over here. We went through making buttons and making button components and passing props in and so on and so forth. Okay, so now I want to go over useMemo. So you know how this list is, it's 100 long, and you might be like, okay, so this probably is a lot for React to render, but React can handle quite a bit, but there's a certain threshold where things start to get a bit janky. So that's where memo comes in. So let me actually start by making this a component over here. So I will take that, and inside components over here I'll make a new file called list.tsx, and I will do the usual. Do I have the React snippets? No, I don't. Okay, so import React from React, and then const list is equal to a function, and I'm just going to return the same thing that I'm just going to render the same thing we were doing outside of the app, outside here in the app. Okay, so now we need the data from the app component over here. So if we remember from our last video, we're going to use props to help pass that down. So we're going to use TypeScript's way of defining props. So it will be a data key, and it will just be an array of data over here. Oh, that's not it. We'll get the type soon for that. So let's just call this a React functional component, and it will take in props. Okay, cool. So now let's first export this. Okay, so it's already exported. So now we just have to import data over here. So import data from /app over here. So that should get rid of all the errors. And then finally, we just have to destructure data over here. So now we got rid of all our errors. Let's export default the list. And now let's bring in our list over here. So the same thing we did for button, we're going to do for list. So over here, I'm going to bring in list. And now finally, the last thing we're going to do is bring in our list over here, and then pass in our data that we fetched. Okay, so now if we save that, we should see that nothing's changed. Like, it looks exactly the same, and that's perfect. And let's bring these two buttons back to prove a point about how slow something might get. So let me uncomment all this out. Handle increment, it goes over here, and save that. Okay, so now if I click it, I spam click this as fast as I can too. You see it's pretty snappy, right? It's pretty snappy. There's nothing really wrong with it. But there's a problem that arises when you have a lot of data. Like, a component is really, really intensive when it comes to rendering. So to emulate that, I'm just gonna copy over the JSON data. So I'm just gonna replicate it multiple times. So I'll just have a for loop, and this for loop will go up to, I think 50 is enough. I will copy all of this data 50 times. So const data is equal to data, and all I'm going to do is data.push, and I want to push all the data that's coming from the JSON response. And then finally, I just want to set the data over there. Okay, so now let me actually go here and say length. We're going to see a few console errors right now. Yeah, we see quite a bit, and that's because of the key prop. Since the data is replicated, the keys aren't really unique. So to just get rid of that error, what I did is, or what I will do is, I will get in UUID. So if you're using yarn, just say yarn add UUID, or if you have npm, just say npm install UUID. So this should get you UUID, which will just give you unique strings. So let me import from UUID, and I think it's U4. U4, V4? V4. Yeah, V4, there we go. Okay, so V4 will give me just the, they have different versions of UUID. So let me save that, and, oh, I did, the server's not running, so yarn start. And then I will restart this as soon as that boots up. Oh, not here. Okay, cool. So we're back up, we're back online. We got rid of all the errors over here. Okay, so now let's notice one thing. We're rendering about 50 times 200. So I'm not gonna try to do the math here, but here I'm trying to spam click this button. I'm like spam clicking it over here, and it's taking long to update. It's taking super long to update. You see every click is like super slow. I'm like spamming it right now and it's not working. It's because the list is re-rendering or trying to re-render over and over again. So let's just make things clear over here. I'll just comment this out, and I will say console log list is re-rendering dot, and a re-rendering is spelled wrong. So let's refresh that. And every time we click this button, the list is re-rendering over and over again, and it's not giving enough time for the UI to update. So we don't need the list to re-render over and over again, right? We're just clicking a button and we want this to update. So the way to do that in React is there is a memo function over here. So this pretty much memoizes your component. And let's see what happens now. So I memoized it. Let me refresh and let me click increment me. Look, we aren't even getting the list is rendering console we were getting before, and now it's super snappy. What it's doing is it's skipping over the re-render because it knows that there's nothing to change. And essentially what this does is it takes in a component and it compares the new props to the old props. And in this case, the new props, every time we're passing data, it's not changing between re-renders, so it's not causing the list over here to re-render. So this is a neat little trick. Again, this little disclaimer, do not try to prematurely memoize. It's completely useless. React is pretty good when it comes to optimization, so for the most part you don't have to worry about this. In very edge cases, you will need to use memo. Yeah, and then there's profilers that you can check to make sure that it's working. Okay, cool. So we finished off list. One thing to note is let's go to button over here, and let's save this button, and let's go back over here. So the button over here, like let's say we click this, the button is also re-rendering as well. And this is fine because there's actually needs to be a new function getting called past here every time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a button that just forces a re-render. So button on click, set render, and we're going to make that soon. So set render, it's just going to be a function that calls set render, and set render is just going to be, let me check over here. So set render. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to update set number with the same value, because if you set state, it causes the React components to re-render. So let me save this over here and refresh, and let me click increment me, and we notice there's rendering button, increment me, rendering button, decrement me. So both of those buttons are getting re-rendered. So let's go to our button component and let's memoize this too, right? We don't want to see those logs. It's showing us that it's memoizing, and it might not always be good. So I saved that, and we're still not done. So if we click this, it's still re-rendering, and this is a JavaScript quirk. Primitive values like strings, numbers, booleans are easily comparable. What memo does is does a shallow compare, and it does referential equalities for objects and functions. Every time app re-renders, there's a new function being declared. So to stop function from getting redeclared over and over again, we can use useCallback over here, and we will wrap that in the function. So what useCallback does is just what useCallback does is just wraps the function and then returns a new function. So here's a dependency array, and it will watch this to watch for any changes. So right now there's no changes in there, and I should probably put num as a dependency. I will also might have to put set num as a dependency. No, I'd only have to put num as a dependency here. Okay, so I have this God button at the top. Let me name this also God button. Re-render, and it's just going to be closing the button over here. So I save that. I have this re-render button at the top, and if I click it, now I do not see the button getting re-rendered again, and that is all because we wrap this function in a useCallback. So it's not getting redeclared over and over again because number is not changing. But if we click increment me, it says that it's re-rendering. This is because the function is getting redeclared. So because the num value is now changed, it's different. So now it redeclares handle me and gets it passed down. So this is completely expected behavior. You can work around this, especially for this example. Depends on the use case that you're working on. Really, yeah. Okay, last thing I want to cover is use context and React's own provider context provider. So essentially what that is we can declare sort of like a global state, and all components nested in that provider can get direct access to the state without getting passed down. You know how in list we were passing props down? There's instances where list also renders other components, and those components render other components, and we need to pass one single property all the way down to a component nested 5 deep just for the data. And that's not the best way to go about it. That's called prop drilling, and there's ways to go around it. And one of the ways is context. So I'm going to make a context folder over here. So I already have one declared. I'll make a file called data. I won't name it context because it's already inside a context folder. Okay, cool. So let me import React again from React. We're going to use the context. So create context, and we're going to use context. Okay. So now I just want to declare the type of data that the context is going to store. So interface context data is just going to be our same old data that we are fetching right now. So let me import. Actually, I don't even need it inside app anymore because we're pulling the state outside. So I'm just going to cut this and paste it over here. Okay, and now data I can use as a data array, and now we just have to declare the context. So context is equal to create context, and we're going to declare this initially as undefined, and this is fine. I'll show you why we are doing this. So React context, also we want to pass in the type. So context data or undefined. Okay, so now we have that. let's now create our context. So const provider, sorry, let's create our provider is equal to just a regular type of React function. And what's gonna happen inside is the same thing. So we're gonna fetch the data. So let's go over here and into data and paste this over here. Let's also get in use effect over here. Okay, so that should be it. And also we want to pull out this data over here. So we don't want app to worry about this data. We want the provider to worry about it. And then finally, this will return context. Let me try to remember. So context dot provider. Yeah, so context dot provider, and then this will take in a value. Also, because this will be wrapping other components, we will need to all the nested components inside this would also need to be re-rendered. And the way we do that is we just say whatever's getting passed in as the children, we will just pass directly into it. So let's save that. Okay, so now context provider takes in a value. Now what is this value? This value is either undefined or the context value, which is what we defined over here. So in this case, the value is just going to be data and data, right? So it's going to be this data over here. Also, we need to pull in use state. So that's going to help store our state, and then we're going to just pass whatever value we have to the context provider, and this will be responsible for passing it on to the children, to its children. So one thing is that we don't need to say data, we can just say data and get away with it. And then finally, we need to just make a use context function. So export use context is equal to a function export const use context. I'm going to say use data context just to make it more explicit. So const context is equal to use context. So we're trying to use this context, which is going to be this over here. So we're going to use this context over there, and so block scope variable cannot be something when it's reused. Provider, okay, we just have to export this. So export default blah, save that. Oh, okay, sorry, I renamed the same thing. So this should just be data context over here, just to be more explicit. And then let me rename this over here and over here, and then finally I just pass it over here. Okay, so now depending on whether the component is nested in the provider, this could either return undefined or the actual data. So just to make sure it's not undefined, we will just say if context is equal to undefined, then we just want to throw an error. So throw error. Oh, my keyboard is messed up again. So error data context is not defined. And then at the very end, we're just going to return the context. If it's not undefined, then it'll just go over here. Otherwise, it will get wrapped over here. Okay, so I think we have everything we need. So now in the app, let's focus on what we need to remove. So we can remove use effect over here. Data is not existing anymore. We don't need to pass data through list like this anymore. We can just remove it. So, and then we can also remove data because we're just going to access it directly inside. So now let's go inside our components list and remove this again because we're not passing anything in. Now to access the data from the context, all we need to do is bring in that use context. So from // context / data, and then this will just be use data context over here. So now we can just const, I'm just going to destructure this, is equal to use context data. So this should return me the context, and within that context is my data. So you have the IntelliSense kicking in here. So now if we save this, we should get an error. So it says data is not defined. So let's go back over here. Data is not defined over in apps. Let's fix what I need to save this. Where is this coming from? Okay, data context is not defined over here. So it's throwing an error over here for a specific reason. So we forgot to wrap everything in our provider. So we're going to do exactly that. So let's go to app and let's bring in our provider. So import data provider from /context / data. And now all we have to do is take this provider and wrap it over the components that need it. So in this case, I'm just gonna wrap it over the entire application. But in your case, please try to wrap it as close to what's needed. You don't want to bubble it up to the very top. It might lead to performance problems, really, if you're not careful. The lower you nest it, the less children it re-renders. Anyways, okay, so we have our list over here, and you see now nothing's getting passed into list. If we go into list, all we're doing is we're calling on the use data context to get our data. One thing you'll notice is that this actually kills the re-rendering. So if we click increment me, it says list is re-rendering, and now it's kind of slow again. This is because the data getting passed in isn't memoized. So we have the component getting memoized, but this object over here is not memoized. So to do that, let's go back into context. It's going to be the last thing we do. So there's another. So memo is for functions, and then useMemo is for data. So over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to memoize this value. So this value over here, I'm going to memoize it. So const value is equal to useMemo, and it's going to be a function that returns data. So this should be it, and it should have a dependency array of data. So if data changes, then useMemo will run again and redeclare this. And finally, we can take this value and pass it right in here. So we save that, and syntax error over there, save that. And okay, so cool, we have everything getting re-rendered. We have our list is re-rendering. Let's see if memoizing is in effect. Let's click this, and yeah, it's going super fast, and all we're seeing is that the buttons are incrementing. That's the only thing that is changing. So let's go back into button over here. So button is re-rendering over here. Okay, that's totally fine. That doesn't make a difference. The main thing is that now we are using our context. So over here, we are using our context over here to pull in our data and pass it to the provider. And whatever is its children will have access to the data through the use context over here. This is super helpful and super nice, honestly. Let's try to figure out one thing. So I said one of the issues is you don't try to bubble it up. So let's only bubble it to where it's needed. So just where list is declared over here. And then I will just nest it over here. And then I can just remove this. Okay, save that and undo that, save that. Refresh this, and let me click increment me. Okay, so this is exactly the same. This is fine over here. I thought it would be doing something else, but that's totally okay. Yeah, so this actually brings it to the end of this video. So I hope you found this helpful. We went over Memo, useCallback, and React's own state management in the context provider. This is all really advanced React concepts, but it'll really push your application to the limits, to be honest, and then it'll also push your developing experience to the limits. In any case, I hope everyone found this video helpful. If you did, leave a comment down below, show your support, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.